on Grahamsay, for example, there is not a school, nor a pub, nor a shop. And if you can provide those people that quality of life where you could lay fish and chips on a Friday, that sort of thing, if you can provide a connecting service, starting with the mail, of course, if you were living on those islands, you could really imagine that would make a really big difference to your week or a really big difference to your day to have that connection at a time when the ferry service is on a schedule, but you don't align with it.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 400. Can drones deliver the mail? For that question, we head to London, England, to speak with Michael Merritt, Commercial and Growth Manager at Skyports Drone Services. Skyports Drone Services is a drone logistics company and provider and operator of eVTOL drones for cargo deliveries, survey, and surveillance. The company is expert in the operation of long-range and beyond visual line-of-sight flight for a multitude of use cases, including ship-to-shore and maritime applications, medical and dangerous goods deliveries, and AI surveys for the agriculture and infrastructure sectors. Headquartered in London, Skyports Drone Services has projects operating across 4 continents, including Asia, North America, South America, and Europe. At Skyports, Michael leads on strategy and operations, particularly in the area of drone deliveries. He has also worked as a flight operations engineer and pilot, gaining hundreds of hours of flight time experience in operating flights across many of Skyports Drone Services projects. He studied as an aerospace engineer at the University of Bristol and holds general visual certificates for fixed-wing and rotary drone operation. Recently, Skyports Drone Services announced the launch of the Orkney iPort project, a fully electric drone logistics project established in partnership with Royal Mail, the Orkney Islands Council Harbour Authority, and Loganair. The project will deliver 2 new capabilities: daily interport delivery of Royal Mail items and the demonstration of shore-to-ship deliveries. The iPort project is significant as it represents the first UK drone delivery project, which can be conducted on a permanent basis under existing regulatory frameworks, a milestone made possible due to the unique landscape of Orkney. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Michael talks about Skyports Drone Services, the Orkney iPort project, and how Skyports is working to create a permanent daily mail delivery service supported by drones. But before we hear from Michael, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And just a reminder, starting in June, the Drone Radio Show podcast and myself will be taking the summer off from doing new interviews. I'll be working on some things behind the scenes, doing some traveling, and retooling the podcast for the future. Look for new episodes in September. So let's learn how drones are going to be used to deliver the mail with Michael Merritt of Skyports. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Michael to introduce himself.
Hi, Randy. I'm Michael Merritt. I'm the Commercial and Growth Manager for Skyports. My particular focus is on our drone deliveries. So it is my job to set up our new drone delivery networks in our new markets around the world, specifically focused in the EMEA region.
Michael, tell us about Skyports. What does the company do?
The company's split into 2. The company was originally founded as a kind of long time horizon infrastructure business for the growing eVTOL market, which is the kind of urban air mobility, electric vertical takeoff and landing market, with the original premise that Lots of investment was fueling into this space to build these kind of new electric vehicles, but they didn't have a place to land. So the company was originally founded with that vision in mind, that we would go around the world and develop these kind of different, the modern heliport, as it were, to help people transit around cities. Shortly after founding, there was a distinct gap in the market for a drone services business, and specifically within that, drone deliveries. And ever since that, we've been really growing very quickly across the world, doing deliveries, survey and surveillance, blue chip companies and governments, organizations in the UK like the NHS, Royal Mail. And today we have everyday permanent recurring operations in Singapore doing ship-to-shore deliveries, and also working for the Singapore government doing water quality monitoring and operations like that.
How does drone delivery relate to the vertiports?
So the two businesses, for the purpose of operation, are entirely separate. The operations may one day occur at the same place. Typically, eVTOL operations center around cities. The concept of urban air mobility is to rapidly move from one part of the city to another, or from one region to another. Whereas typically today, drone deliveries and survey and surveillance are focused where road density is very low, where in very hard to reach areas, like Orkney, where you can make a really big difference with these air systems, rather than in those urban locations where they have to be really well connected. So eVTOLs focuses on flying over the top of a very congested area, whereas typically today, due to the regulatory environment, drone services are particularly useful and have really great impact in areas where it's very rural. So that's why the two businesses don't necessarily today, we don't necessarily fly from the same sites and operate from the same areas, but there's definitely that kind of, I hate the word synergy, but there's definitely that sort of thing that could happen in the future.
How long has Skyports been providing drone delivery?
The drone services business was founded in 2018 and mainly focused on the UK market. So we flew the first ever NHS medical drone delivery operation and the first ever delivery to a named individual as part of an operation with Royal Mail. And ever since then, we've expanded, and now the drone services business has a base in London in the UK, a base in Aylesbury in the UK as our kind of flight operational training base, and a base in Singapore that covers off the kind of Asia Pacific region, and one in South America for kind of Colombia and that sort of region.
Does Skyports manufacture its own drones?
Well, we like to think of ourselves as a bit like an unmanned airline. So we are more of the kind of the British Airways than the Boeing. The reality of it is the market's relatively fragmented. So it's not, you can't just go and buy Boeings today in the drone market. You really have to do quite a lot of work with those OEMs to say, these are my core requirements. This is what I must carry. These are the weather limitations that I need to do it in. But we typically don't do any of that work ourselves. Drones are a little bit like iPhones today. They go out of date very quickly, and there's always a newer and shinier version which has much greater features. So we keep ourselves very light in that respect. And we're always using the best system for the kind of that particular use case.
So you don't have to worry about getting the drone certified or approved. You just have to manage the operations.
Yeah, so we don't deal in the certification of the platforms themselves. I mean, if we just look at the drone market as a whole, in the kind of small drone market that we work in, there's only one certified drone in the world today. There are very few systems that have reached that level or the pinnacle of certification that would allow you to fly over cities in the same way that a manned helicopter would. But for a lot of our operations that are in very rural areas or over water, or for oil and gas customers, those are not necessarily a limitation. We don't need a certified system. We need very robust systems that are incredibly safe and highly automated, but we don't necessarily need that next level of regulatory compliance until we enter the inner city environment, or until the regulatory environment in those countries, and particularly the UK, says to us, oh, you must have a certified system.
Okay, so let's talk about the Orkney iPort project. First of all, where are the Orkney Islands?
Orkney is a collection of islands that sits just north of Scotland. And for us, we'll be operating within kind of a subset of Orkney, which is out of the Stromness hub to Grahamsay and north of Hoy. So just off kind of the southwest corner of the main island.
What are the parameters of the project?
So the Orkney iPort project stands for the intermodal port operation. And the goal of the project is to create the UK's first fully integrated intermodal port. And what that really means is we're going to be doing three things. We'll be demonstrating our ship-to-shore capability in the UK. We will be doing a intermarina everyday delivery service in partnership with Royal Mail. And we'll be doing a feasibility study with Loganair and the local airport and the council to look at how will this drone service expand and what sort of impact could we have on a longer term basis as we deliver out with maybe larger systems or fixed wing systems flying out into some of those locations that don't receive a scheduled daily air service.
Let's talk about each activity, starting with the daily airport mail delivery. How is the mail delivered today, and how will it change using drones?
So I would say the crown jewel of the project and the main focus of the project is that intermarina delivery service. And how it's done today is that our project partner, Loganair, flies the mail in to Kirkwall Airport. And then that day, it's sorted in Kirkwall. So there's a sorting center there, and they divide the mail up for the different islands. Then the next day, it's driven down to Stromness, and it boards the ferry. I think it's around 7 o'clock in the morning or sometime like that, depending on the schedule of the time. And it makes its way, it's about a 20-minute ferry or so to Grahamsay and then north of Hawaii. So what we are intending to do is not only to deliver the mail by drone, but also to deliver the mail in an accelerated schedule to do that a day earlier. So our schedule would run that project partner Loganair would deliver the mail via the Britten-Norman Islander into Kirkwall Airport. It would then get sorted in the sorting office in Kirkwall. We would then drive it down to Stromness, where it would be immediately loaded on to the drone to be flown to Grahamsay in North Hawaii, where it would be distributed that day. So instead of having to wait to be delivered the next day, it would be delivered that day. Now, that's a nice wider benefit. But I think the real core benefit that we have here is the systems that we're using, and we haven't yet decided the exact system we're going to use, but they have very good uptime. And the issue that Grahamsay and North Hawaii have is that the small passenger ferry that services them is unable to dock at the marina once the winds pick up. So for us, we're able to just fly that across, and we can do that with a really strong uptime.
How far over water will the drone need to travel?
So it's just a matter of a few kilometers. For us, it's a very short distance that actually can be flown under current regulatory permissions, under what was traditionally known as the extended visual line of sight permission. So we don't have to get a temporary danger area or a kind of transponder mandatory zone or some kind of novel airspace structure like that.
Once the mail reaches Orkney by drone, how is it then delivered to individual mailboxes?
The chain of command from a kind of a mail delivery perspective will stay exactly the same. So there will be no change to the postal workers who are on those islands. It will be for them exactly the same. The only difference there will be is they won't necessarily have to take that ferry across.
Overall, what are you hoping to achieve with this project?
This project is really about the service quality. We believe we can provide a really high uptime on a regular basis to areas that are really very rural. I mean, these communities are incredibly remote. On Grahamsay, for example, there is not a school, nor a pub, nor a shop. And if you can provide those people that quality of life where you could lay fish and chips on a Friday, that sort of thing, if you can provide a connecting service, starting with the mail, of course, if you were living on those islands, you could really imagine that would make a really big difference to your week or a really big difference to your day to have that connection at a time when the ferry service is on a schedule, but you don't align with it or is not running for weather reasons or whatever it might be.
When will the project begin?
So we've got a little bit of work to do around the initial regulatory approvals and there's some complexity around the carriage of dangerous goods and elements like that. But we expect the service to begin in early August this summer. And, with this particular round of funding from the Department for Transport and the Connected Places Catapult, this will last for about 3 months. But it is not limited, like any other drone operation in the UK, we're not limited by regulation. So we're not relying on a temporary danger area like other drone operations. We're able to fly this permanently, should the people of Orkney want to support this in the future.
Will you deliver all of the mail that is typically done via the ferry? Packages and such, as well as letters?
We can be very honest. We won't be able to deliver a drain pipe or a pallet of bricks, for example, which I'm sure there are these outsized items that are transported in the Royal Mail system, and we've seen that. But what we're aiming to do is deliver 80% of all e-commerce items. And we think that by doing that, it's a relatively achievable task to deliver 80% of e-commerce items. It's about, we believe and estimate it's about 2 to 3 sacks per island per day of kind of those sort of packages and mail. And we think that that's a pretty achievable target for us.
In terms of the operation, will the drones fly beyond visual line of sight or have any autonomous capabilities?
Technically, the systems are capable of flying, supervised automatic. So, a simple waypoint-based system. How we will actually be flying them as part of the operation is through an extended visual line of sight permission. We won't be flying BVLOS. We chose that specifically, partly because of the geographic nature of the islands. We are able to do it extended visual line of sight. And that is really exciting because every single drone operation that's flown BVLOS, that's done a real delivery service in the UK, has had to end. And it's had to end because, unfortunately, the regulations only allow for a 3-month temporary danger area. Now, doing it like this, we are going to learn an awful lot about what it takes for a drone service to fly every day. We're going to learn whether or not these systems are capable of standing up to the harsh Orkney weather and the strong winds that are up there, and whether or not these systems we believe they can provide great benefit. But I think this will be a really good challenge to us, to put these systems into really harsh environments and to put them there in a way where they could continue, where we're not telling the customer, regulations don't allow for this to continue. This could be, subject to funding and subject to the commercial stacking up. It could be a real service that happens every day.
How many pieces of mail are delivered today?
It's really hard to know, and there's peaks and troughs. So in truth, we won't know that until we get started. We've done some initial work to estimate what that load looks like, and we've classified that by sack rather than by single items. So we believe that to be about 2 or 3 sacks. But exactly how that is split at the moment, we're yet to find out.
Is there anything about the project that we missed?
I think the only thing to note is that this will be the first time that anyone has tried to carry dangerous goods that are within the mail on a real live project. Obviously, there is some regulatory risk there, but for us, we are aiming to provide a real service. Like we did for the NHS back in 2021, we were the first company in the UK to be awarded UN 3373 carriage of dangerous goods approval, which is the same approval that you require as an airline pilot to carry that dangerous goods on an aircraft. And we were awarded that, and we're looking to leverage those similar permissions on this project. Exactly what we'll be able to carry is a little bit unclear at this time, but we're looking to carry as many real items, as possible, and as many exemptions as possible, to allow us to provide a very real service, not just a kind of proof of concept or not just an initial demonstration, but to do a real operation.
What do the residents think about the project?
So we've been in contact with the local postal workers and by the nature of that, been in touch with some of the kind of the locals on those islands. And as far as we can tell, they're very excited for us to come. I mean, there's been lots of mentions of, can you bring over a 6-pack of beers at 7 p.m. when the ferry stops? Who knows what's possible? But, I think that it could be a real lifeline for these people, which is really great. I also think the other thing to mention is, from what we understand, we are able to make quite a significant difference just by the nature of employing local people on these islands. So we will need people to load and unload and interact with the drone as it lands on those islands. And we're looking to employ local people through our hub operator program to do that.
Okay, let's switch over to the demonstration of the shore-to-ship deliveries. Again, what is the objective of this project?
The ship-to-shore demonstration is really to talk to the future a little bit. So our interport delivery operation is a real thing. It's something that we're looking to do every single day and provide a real service. Ship-to-shore deliveries today, we fly them in Singapore. We do kind of bunker sample deliveries, small parts delivery, cash to master, operations like that. And specifically within Kirkwall, they have a kind of growing ecosystem for offshore renewables and offshore oil and gas. And what we're looking to do is run a series of demonstrations that shows kind of what's the future for drone hubs at a port like Kirkwall? Is it possible for us to fly out to turbine farm or fly out to an offshore asset and deliver these kind of parts in maybe low visibility conditions when it's difficult for helicopters to approach those assets? We want to do some of these demonstrations so that we can really give the Harbour Council and the Harbour Authority an understanding of where they could go with all this and how, maybe our intermarina operation would be what we're starting with. And in future, as that ecosystem for offshore renewable and offshore oil and gas, builds out, we'll be able to service, many more areas and many more use cases outside of just the mail, but into these other sectors as well.
How is the project organized? Are you going to have a series of flight tests?
Yeah, so we have a technical operations team who are at the moment designing what those tests look like. I will just say that the project itself only kicked off about a month ago or so. So we're still in the kind of requirements capture and user story phase where we're working with the council to find out, what are those core use cases? What are those locations? What does the concept of operations look like so that we can design a realistic set of demonstrations that will say, maybe it's short range ship to shore operations, maybe it's long range delivery to an asset, but we need to figure out what those demonstrations look like. And today I'd probably be talking out of turn to go into the details.
What challenges do you anticipate?
I think for me, the biggest challenge with both the intermarina and also the ship to shore is weather. This will be the kind of harshest weather environment that we've ever flown our systems in. And we've had to go through a very detailed vehicle selection process in order to meet that. The average wind speed in Orkney could be 30 miles an hour just as a base. And typically drones are very much on the ground at that time. So the main challenge we have with both those operations is achieving a good uptime in that challenging environment. But specifically for ship to shore, that weather brings other limitations. For example, the nature of the moving vessels. If the sea state is rough, then we are still working on landing on those sorts of ships. In Singapore today, it's very flat out there, and although it's incredibly complex from a weather perspective, it's quite simple to land on those kind of drifting vessels. But that will be a completely different environment up in Orkney.
What type of drones will be used? Fixed wings, rotors, hybrids?
In Singapore today, we have two types of systems that are operational. We have a short-range system for the anchorages nearby the maritime drone estate, which is around 10 kilograms to about 10 kilometers or so. And then we have a longer-range hybrid VTOL system that can fly, I think it's up to about 100 kilometers with a 3-kilogram payload.
When do you hope to begin the test flights?
So the first flights as part of the ship-to-shore operation will start in parallel with the intermarina. They'll run for a little bit of a shorter time. They're demonstrations. It's not a complete service. But, I think we're still targeting around that kind of early August timeframe.
The third project is the assessment of heavy payload operations. What is the purpose of that project?
The most important element here is we're not just doing one service or one set of flights or kind of trying to solve one use case. We're trying to create a sustainable, commercial, permanent, recurring operation in Orkney. That's our goal with any of the operations that we set up or any of the projects that we do. And as part of that, we need to consider flying out to those islands where we might be 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers out, where they may not receive a daily air service, they may not receive ferry service. And those kind of very remote islands that would require maybe a larger payload vehicle or a system that can, get into confined spaces. That's what we're really interested in understanding as part of that feasibility study, is working with Loganair, working with the airport, and understanding which of these islands have really challenging service provision. We don't necessarily want to fly to islands which already are well served by Loganair. We want to fly to those islands where it's very challenging for them to get, their everyday supplies. And we could be doing that as part of a wider effort to provide a kind of heavier payload systems into those sorts of islands. And that's what we're really looking to figure out, which islands need this kind of service the most and how might we service those best from the existing infrastructure that's there at Kirkwall Airport.
Well, you're definitely going to have a busy summer.
Yeah, it's actually a really exciting time, specifically for the heavy payload category. You may have seen on our website, but we recently began the onboarding process of the Piker Pelican cargo, which is the largest automated electric autonomous airplane in the world, which is a kind of cargo platform that's capable of carrying a kind of real useful load, kind of similar to that of a small light aircraft.
Will the Pica system be used in any of the flights?
So we won't be flying that as part of this operation. And then I will just caveat that this kind of system is under a lot of regulatory constraint for obvious reasons. It's quite a large platform, and we're flying it in very controlled environments and very controlled trials, and not as part of this project. But it's just to say that this sort of technology is coming. It might be a year or two from now that these systems are flying commercially and as regulations permit. But what is really exciting for organizations like third-party logistics companies is that these sorts of systems that provide a kind of a real useful alternative to a van potentially are out there, they do exist, and they're being trialed today. It doesn't mean they're ready for operations like those kind of smaller drones will be flying into Marina, but they are ready to be trialed in a kind of very controlled environment for the initial kind of test that will allow them in the future to be doing these kind of real services.
From your perspective, what makes Skyports uniquely qualified to undertake projects like the ones we just discussed?
It's a very good question. And I think what it comes down to is our ability to see the entire picture. So lots of companies specialize in a single element. If we look at a drone operation today, it's regulations, it's pilots, it's infrastructure, and it's operations. And those are the four things where we have four different departments, and our company encompasses those four areas. We do not specialize in one particular thing. We're generalists across those four areas, which means that we're able to kind of hold the whole project. We're not a drone manufacturer that tells you, I've got this drone, it's the best drone for the job, because most likely it isn't the best drone for the job. When you look at all these different use cases, there are different systems that are really great for particular things. And for us, we're able to look at that from a kind of holistic perspective and apply all of our knowledge across those kind of four areas and complete the task in a way that's kind of best, not only for the customer, but also from a regulatory and operational perspective. And I think that's what gives us the edge, is that we can do all of that in-house and don't necessarily have to kind of subcontract or fragment that approach by having a kind of a large consortium to deliver that one product.
What's it mean for you to be part of this project at a time in the industry where drone logistics is really starting to accelerate?
I think it's a pretty exciting time. For me, what's really exciting is that we are on the cusp of new regulation. We're on the cusp of what I believe to be scalable adoption of this type of technology. If you look at the European market and the regulation that exists there, in January of this year, we now have mandated use-based regulation, which allows for crewed and uncrewed aviation to fly together. I'm not saying it will happen overnight and there will be lots of these operations, but that regulatory environment exists. If you look at Singapore today, the regulatory environment for flying drones there and flying them at scale exists. And we're at this point where these different countries and their kind of national civil aviation authorities are allowing these operations to occur. And I think we've reached an inflection point where for anyone that's kind of survived the industry up to this point, we'll really get to see the benefits as we're able to, all of the use cases, which I think people talk about the 3Ds, the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous. And I think we're at a point now where we can really do those use cases. Whereas maybe a year or two ago, we might have been talking about them and saying, wouldn't it be great if we could do maritime deliveries or deliveries inter-island or deliveries to an oil rig? And now we're at a point where the regulatory environment is going to allow us to do that. And for me, it's really exciting to be at that point where we can finally say, this no longer needs to be a proof of concept or a pilot project. These things can be real.
Are there any other Skyports projects that you'd like to mention?
I think the most exciting thing that we're doing today, we're doing loads of really great projects, but I think the most exciting thing for me is the operation that the team are conducting in Singapore and Korea. So every day, real ship-to-shore operations. Those are commercial, recurring, everyday deliveries where if people need cash, food, documents, fuel samples, we can deliver those to them in a fraction of the time it would take for the diesel launch boat, and all completely electrically driven. for a fraction of the price. And that is, to me, that's really exciting. And I think that we'll see over the next couple of years real growth in offshore and real growth in maritime. And for me, that's where I'm really excited about those kind of projects that we've got going on today.
Getting back to the Orkney iPorts project, what can we expect to see over the next several months?
Yeah, so I think the core milestone that we're really looking at is we'll be up there over the next couple of months doing the kind of pre-deployment work, doing all the relevant surveys and meeting with all the stakeholders. And I think the big milestone that we're all waiting for is kind of first flights to Stromness, to Grahamsay in the start of August. So we'll be keeping everybody well abreast of how that goes. And I'm sure there'll be lots of press that goes out.
And for my final question, Michael, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
I think I'll just circle back to my point from earlier is that I think we're reaching an inflection point in the drone industry today. I think the regulation will allow drone operators and the associated ecosystem to really harness some of the benefits that we've been talking about for years now. We have the potential to make a huge difference in the next couple of years. And anyone that is in the drone industry today should be really excited about the change that's coming and the kind of real impact that we can make as a result of that.
That's it for episode 400 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Michael Merritt of Skyports Drone Services. I want to thank Michael for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Skyports Drone Services or want to connect with Michael, check out the webpage at skyportsdroneservices.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.